I invite our first speaker this morning, Mr. Joshua Thoma. He's a senior at Linden High School. Welcome, Josh.
Good morning. My name is Joshua Thoma, and as you've already heard, I'm a senior at Linden High School. And I am, as many of you have guessed, the son of the man most of you know as Pastor Thoma, but who I refer to as Dad. In order to share with you why I would be one to stand here and present a paper that I have written, I should probably tell you a little bit about myself. First, I love economics. In fact, I am currently taking AP Macroeconomics, AP Microeconomics, and AP Statistics. Combined with AP Government and a love for political science in general, don't let my age fool you. I have a genuine interest in the inner workings of government. I do hope to pursue a career in politics, although not necessarily becoming a candidate for any particular office, but perhaps serving as an advisor. At the same time, I'm equally interested in becoming a fighter pilot in the Air Force. Second, the reason I'm up here is because my dad asked me to be here. No, he didn't mandate for me to do this like he'd mandate for me to mow the grass or take out the garbage, but rather because he knows me and knows my concerns as one of the last of the millennials. And he thought I should take some time to speak to the issue in a public way. It's an honor to do it, and I'm glad to share with you. If you don't mind, I'd like to take you back in time with me, back to November 9th, 2016, the day after our nation's presidential election. One might think it would be a day like any other. It began like that, at least, like so many days before. My dad dropped me off about a half hour before the first bell, and as I made my way inside, rather than the usual bustle of busy teachers and students preparing for the day, I noticed a much stranger silence about the place. Nevertheless, I walked to my locker as I always do, plugging my earbuds into my ears along the way, and I grabbed what I needed for my first hour, which was band. Closing my locker, I went to the band room and sat down in my usual chair, took out A Tale of Two Cities, and picked up where I'd left off while I waited. Over the course of the minutes that passed, the band room became fuller and fuller, and so did the noise. Eventually, the noise overtook my music and my ability to concentrate while reading. But rather than putting the book away, I found myself intrigued and listened to some of the conversations taking place between my friends. So, rather than closing my book and putting it away, I left it open and pretended to keep reading. The students were talking about the results of the election. I should mention first that none of those in the room who had forecasted a Clinton victory were smiling, nor were they making good on their promises, led, of course, by the brilliant entertainers in Hollywood to move to Canada if she lost. But they were angry, very angry. Their 89% chance of victory had been so surprisingly swept away in a pretty significant defeat by Donald Trump. I will admit that a few times here and there, I struggled to hold back the urge to laugh as the discussions of the failure of the Electoral College and the high probability of possible impeachment were already rolling from their lips. Apparently, Donald Trump had already found a way to commit treason, or at least a high crime or misdemeanor, which are necessary for such proceedings, and he'd managed to do it in the past 6 hours. As the morning continued to unfold, more and more outrage at the election results filled not only the band room, but the school. Once my first hour class actually began and order was restored, the silence was a testament to what I was feeling in the moment, the feeling of being alone. I was glad that Trump had won, but I also knew what his victory would mean for me as a conservative teenager in what is unarguably a large liberal influence system of education that is working diligently to influence the children in its care. The high school of Linden, Michigan is by no means an exception. Thankfully, at least for the first hour, the band teacher was forthright in telling all of the students that nothing about the election would be discussed so that the group could get to work. Beyond this, rage-filled discourse regarding the election was pretty much serving as the heartbeat of nearly every engagement throughout the day. At lunch, playing chess with a few of my friends, the conversation was contentious. Although with them, while a few of them were angry, the discussion was civil and really rather respectful. I appreciated that. I did, however, learn from one of them that his first hour teacher actually broke down into tears during class over the election results. The atmosphere that morning is something I'll never forget, and it stemmed from clear defeat by a nation's citizens of ideologies that quite literally permeates the life of the school and a good portion of the adults charged with teaching what is a captive audience of easily influenced listeners. But even as I say that, as one of the last of the millennial generation, I would caution you, don't count us out just yet. There are human beings currently occupying seats in public school classrooms who, even as they are inundated with one particular political party's agenda, there's something about them that's very different than the ones sitting at the teacher's desk. First of all, speaking for myself and from my side of things, there are some who are not so easily influenced. We have ideas, we have opinions. And while the prevalent efforts are pretty much the same old and tired destructive doctrines of the liberal agenda, there are those of us who know it, and we are seeing the inescapable torturous situation for what it is and are being forced to make a choice. That choice is to change our perspective on the situation. We are seeing it as an opportunity to take advantage of and to learn firsthand the enemy's strategy from the enemy himself right behind enemy lines. And we are doing it knowing full well that we are next in line to seize the reins of America. I stand before you today as an objectively true image of what I'm describing. Now, with regard to the seemingly unbridled crazy people let loose in the hallways that day after the election, I hope I won't offend you by saying that even those students who are caught up in the fervor of sadness and anger still have something about them that, at least right now, many of our current political personalities no longer possess. And this something gives me hope. Let me lead you to what that is. This past summer, I had the privilege of attending a week-long political summer camp called Boys State. It is a profitable experience supported by the American Legion and well worth any young person's time for learning the inner workings of government and political structures. While I was there, I formed lifelong friendships with other young men who are like and incredibly unlike myself. One of the days I was there, we participated in a team-building activity designed to define where we stood on the political spectrum. As questions were asked of the group, their answers determined whether they would step to the right or to the left. As I expected, I found myself well entrenched to the right of the group, but as I looked across the field where this was happening, I saw my good friend Barkle. At the beginning of the camp, he had run for mayor, but instead found himself elected as a circuit court judge. Go figure. Anyway, he was almost as far left as anyone could go without ending up in the weeds. Now, I share this because despite this activity, which was very visual, offering an unquestionable statement about what we believed regarding most of the significant issues in our nation, perhaps even being a team-building activity that could have backfired and shattered all of our friendships. When it came time for us to get together to run the towns and counties we were charged with governing, we were able to work together. In fact, I should share with one of you that at one point of the week, we were visited by 3 political leaders from Lansing, one a conservative, one a libertarian, and one a liberal. And even though they promised not to engage in attacking one another, they did anyway, and we booed them off the stage. Such vicious treatment of one another was not what we wanted, and it wasn't what we were about. Instead, most, if not all of us, learned that even in the toughest of circumstances, it's possible to compromise without actually compromising one's integrity or agenda. I learned that the others across the aisle, so to speak, felt the same way. Now, don't get me wrong, everything was definitely political and sometimes very contentious, especially when my town tried to work in a couple of A-10 Thunderbolts into our police and fire budget. But even in those contentious situations, they didn't result in collapsing the common spirit of working for the good of the people we were elected to serve. No one in a seat of authority broke down into tears when their candidate wasn't elected. And that, in my mind, is the common difference that gives me hope. We, the millennials, are still students, youth governed by parents, and people who are shepherded. The totality of our lives exists within the framework of learning and service. Learning and service. Together these produce humility, Now, I know that humility would almost never be applied to a teenager, let alone a millennial, but I set before you that this is what made my conversation at lunch over chess possible. And it's what made the success of an entire group of up-and-coming teenagers experience reality. With the desire to learn, to serve, and to do so humbly at the helm of any enterprise, namely the government and the political sphere, the current climate would change instantly. And so, to conclude, as one of the last of millennials, someone looking to a possible future in politics, I wonder what can be done to foster this now, so that when students are no longer students, but teachers, and servants are no longer servants, but masters in their fields, I wonder what we can do to make it so that the spirit of learning, service, and humility remains. For one, this conference is a good place to start, and not just because it begins and ends with the one who is the objectively true source for humble service, namely Jesus Christ, but because it is a tool to help activate his followers for faithful engagement in the public square. My generation needs help with this. We need for you to do like my dad did for me, to take notice of those who may be wondering how they can make a difference through the government. We need people like you to help support their education, to help connect them with the right influences, to take them along to the conferences and rallies that deal with the issues they are already immersed with every day. My generation is the next at bat for America. Even when I consider my most liberal-minded friends, I still think we have what it takes for being the future in America, of which you can be hopeful and proud. Thank you.